That's how Dorinda Yancey introduced herself to me. No hello, no handshake, just a clipboard, a clicking pen, and that tight little smile people get when they've been bossing folks around so long they forget somebody might laugh in their face. I didn't sign. I stood there on my porch in the Texas heat looking at her like maybe she'd taken a wrong turn on the way to a psych evaluation. She left the clipboard anyway, walked back to her white Escalade like my signature was just a formality, and drove off. My name's Garrett Wolfson. I'm 58, I've got 40 years of diesel grease worked into my hands, and I own 34 acres on the western edge of Calderwood Pines, Texas. My grandfather cleared that land in 1951. My father ran cattle on it until he died. I inherited it clean, no mortgage, no liens, no easements. Just an old deed in a fireproof lockbox and 4 iron survey pins, still sitting where my grandfather drove them. That land was there long before Calderwood Pines and its HOA. I never bought one of their lots. I never signed their CCRs. I was private ranch land sitting inside a sea of suburban rules, and that worked fine for 11 years. Then Dorinda got elected board president. Dorinda treated the HOA like a tiny country with herself as queen. The first time she came out, she told me the low southeastern corner of my land was actually a community drainage easement. She had paperwork with county stamps and highlighted lines, all of it looking official in the way bad ideas often do when enough toner gets involved. I handed it back and told her my grandfather's deed included that corner with no easements attached, and she ought to check the county records before coming back. 3 weeks later, I woke up to excavators digging into that same corner at 7 in the morning. A foreman named Bryce met me at the line with county-approved plans for a swimming pool. A swimming pool on my ranch. He showed me the permit, the survey, the drainage corridor markings. I looked at the paper, looked at my fence line, and asked him one thing. Did anybody pull the deed on this parcel before they broke ground? He blinked and said, "That's not really my department." No, it wasn't. Bryce was just doing his job. My problem was the people who'd sent him. So I did what years of diesel work taught me to do when something's failing and yelling won't fix it. I got quiet and I started documenting. I borrowed a trail camera from my neighbor. Cliff walked the boundary with my phone, recording every stake and every scrape of disturbed soil. Then went to the barn and opened the lockbox. Inside were my grandfather's deed, my father's probate papers, and a 1962 survey. The southeast corner was marked plain as day. My grandfather's initials sat in the margin EW, same corner those machines were chewing up. That afternoon I called my cousin Harland, who'd spent 40 years doing title work. I gave him the permit number, the parcel number, the HOA's easement claim. 20 minutes later he called back and said, "Buddy, they built on your land, full stop." The county permit file had a transposed parcel number 2 digits switched. That sounds small until you understand what 2 wrong digits can do in property law. It was enough to move the approved construction zone off HOA land and square onto mine, which meant the permit was void. I sent Dorinda a certified letter. Calm, factual, no threats. Construction had begun on my private property without consent. I had documented the encroachment, and I was demanding an immediate halt pending title review. It didn't slow them down. Her lawyer wrote back claiming an implied easement because rainwater had historically drained through that corner of my land. They were trying to turn a drainage ditch into permission. That was when I called Vera Ashcraft. Vera was a real estate litigator with the kind of calm voice that makes bad liars nervous. She reviewed everything and called me back, sounding almost amused. "Garrett," she said, "rainwater doesn't give your HOA the right to build a luxury pool on your ranch." She sent a response. Dorinda ignored it. By June, they had finished the pool ribbon-cutting newsletter photos, blue water glittering like they'd built themselves a resort. Then 2 weeks later, they mailed me a bill. The letter said I owed $1,847 as my share of the maintenance assessment because I was supposedly benefiting from the community amenity. I sat there staring at it while my coffee went cold. They built a pool on my land, then billed me for it. I forwarded the letter to Vera. She called back fast and said, "Do you know what the section they quoted leaves out?" I said, "No." "Your written consent," she said. "Without your signature, that whole thing collapses. Garrett, this isn't just wrong, it's fraudulent." That was when Dorinda quit pretending this was about paperwork and started working the neighborhood. She painted me as the bitter rancher next door trying to ruin summer for everybody's kids. She ran Facebook polls, stirred up homeowners, even called the county and hinted that my cattle operation might be violating ordinances. The officer who came out walked my place, looked over everything, and before he left said, "Calls like this usually tell me more about the caller than the property." Still, the real turn came in discovery. Vera forced the HOA to turn over emails, board, minutes, contracts, permit files. Buried in that pile was one email from Dorinda to the HOA surveyor. "We need that southeast corner included. If we pull the pins and restake it, the drainage argument should hold." I went cold when Vera read it. Pull the pins. My grandfather's iron survey pins had marked that ground for decades. Somebody had physically yanked them out and moved the line to make a lie look legal. Then came the twist that changed everything. A former board member named Carol Finn asked Vera and me to come by. Carol had resigned months earlier, and she sat us at her kitchen table with a manila folder already waiting. "I was waiting for someone with standing to sue," she said. Inside was the amendment Dorinda's lawyer had been using against me, the one supposedly letting the HOA extend services and make claims against neighboring land. Problem was, it had never been properly approved. No valid vote, no lawful process, just signatures and nerve. Then Carol handed us the real bomb. It was a purchase agreement between the developer, Prescott Dunleavy, and a holding company called Calera Acquisitions, LLC. That company had an option to buy the aquatic center below market value once it was fully built and operating. I looked down at the registered agent, Dorinda Yancey, and just like that, the whole thing snapped into focus. This wasn't some HOA president drunk on petty power. This was a scheme. Dorinda and the developer had pushed an illegal amendment, manipulated a boundary, built a pool on stolen land using HOA money, then positioned her private company to buy the finished asset cheap after the members paid for it. After that, everything moved fast. Vera referred the matter to the district attorney. An investigator found one of the original survey pins in scrap behind the contractor's staging area. The surveyor cooperated and handed over the emails and altered records. Dorinda tried one last move before the hearing. She sent a consultant to my porch with a settlement offer. They'd deed back the parcel drop, the countersuit pay me $25,000, and in return, I'd release all claims and stop cooperating with the criminal investigation. When he finished reading it, I said, "Tell them no," because by then I already knew what I wanted. My friend Cliff runs septic and excavation work, and between the two of us, we had already planned what would happen if the court confirmed what my grandfather's deed had said all along. Once that pool legally became mine, we were going to drain every gallon out of it and turn that fancy monument to fraud into something honest. Judge Doris Wafer heard the case on a Tuesday morning in late April. The courtroom was full homeowners, reporters, county people, folks who had finally realized their board president had been using them like a funding source. Vera laid it out clean and merciless: deed chain, original survey void, permit, illegal amendment, the email about pulling the pins, the LLC documents, all of it. At 12:17 p.m., the judge ruled from the bench. The HOA had no valid easement. The permit was void. The amendment was void. I held clear title to the southeastern parcel, including all improvements thereon, including the pool. Nobody cheered. The room just exhaled. By 2 o'clock, Cliff had his pump truck backed up to the pool deck. When that pump kicked on, it sounded like consequence. Water roared through the hoses. The blue shimmer dropped inch by inch. Chlorine gave way to wet concrete and limestone. Residents stood there watching the truth get drained out in public. By sundown, the former Calderwood Pines Aquatic Center was an empty shell on my ranch. The next morning, Cliff and I bolted a commercial livestock waterer into the shallow end, plumbed it to my well, strung a simple electric line along the coping, and opened the gate. 6 Herefords walked in. They didn't care about the lawsuit, the HOA, the fraud, any of it. They just lowered their heads and drank slow and steady under Dorinda's pergola lights. That photograph went national. And here's what stayed with me after all the filings and headlines were over. Power gets loud when it thinks nobody's going to check the paperwork. That's the lesson. Not that justice is quick, because it isn't. It's that greed depends on people being rushed, embarrassed, intimidated, or too tired to push back. Dorinda had a legal fund neighborhood influence and enough confidence to wallpaper a courthouse. What I had was an old deed, a lockbox patience, and the stubborn habit of not signing things just because somebody clicked a pen in my face. In the end, that was enough. Dorinda was removed from the board. Charges followed. The developer paid. The surveyor lost his license. The HOA clawed back money. And that southeastern corner of my land still looks exactly the way karma ought to look in Texas cattle drinking from a place built by thieves who thought nobody would stop them. So let me ask you this. When somebody uses fake authority, legal language, and public pressure to take what was never theirs, is beating them in court enough, or do they deserve the public humiliation too? Tell me what you think in the comments. I want to know where you draw the line between justice and revenge. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a property fight, or somebody in power who thought you wouldn't push back, share your story too.